So our pattern is now cut out, our pieces are cut out of our fabric. Now we need to move on to looking at the directions. So we're going to do that and just give a brief overview of the directions so you can get started on sewing your project. So here we have some sewing directions that came with the pattern that I'm going to be using. What you want to look at is the key up here when you're first starting out. This is usually the same for all pattern directions. You'll see 4 boxes. One box is a little bit more shaded than the rest. Then you have one that's white with little pound symbols in it, and then one that's kind of polka dot looking. So the one that's more shaded, it says underneath it right side. This means that when you're looking at these directions, the ones that look like this box, such as this pattern right here, this means that we're looking at the right side of the fabric. If it is solid white, like this one right here, this is showing you wrong side of the fabric. So if this is stitched together, it's flipped inside out. So this is why this guide is important. So when you're following your directions and you look at the pictures, you know on which side of the fabric you're stitching on. There's also this one, which is white with the pound symbols. This is the key for interfacing. So if you see a picture and it has this type of box coloring in it, then you know that you're seeing it interfacing side up. The polka dot one is for lining. You will sometimes see these, sometimes not, depending on whether or not your project has lining in it. So on the top, we have sewing directions. It'll give you a few basic ideas on how you're going to be sewing. So it gives you tips like you need to pin or machine base seams together in order to hold it together. And your stitch is going to be at the 5/8 seam allowance, unless otherwise stated. So if it doesn't say in these directions what you're going to be doing your seam at, such as these shoulder seams right here, then you should automatically assume it's going to be at the 5/8 inch. That means that where your stitch is going to be 5/8 of an inch away from the edge of your fabric. So if I'm stitching this part right here, I'm going to move my needle, and you can use your little sewing gauge to measure the 5/8 inch and then just sew that away from the edge of the fabric. Also, it says press your seams open unless otherwise indicated. So after you finish sewing a seam, such as if we finish sewing these shoulder seams, we're then going to press open these 2 pieces that are hanging at the top, on top of our seam, open flat. So you're going to have one part on one side and one part on the other side. This is just make sure that our seams always lie flat. So you're going to be using your iron a lot to make sure that everything is nice and neat. So after you have this stuff down, you're now going to look down at the instructions, and sometimes it looks overwhelming, but it's usually because they have it in different languages. So we have it in French and we have it in Spanish here. Here's our project. I'm doing jacket A, so I'm going to read each direction and go step by step, 1 through whatever number it is. There's a picture that correlates with the direction. So here's number 1. This is showing me what it is. So this may look like a lot, but sometimes if you look at the picture, you can see exactly what you need to do. This is stay stitch the front and back at a 1/2 inch. So we're ignoring the 5/8 inch, which they gave us, and we're just doing a 1/2 inch. And it shows a little stitch that's going along the top. So that makes it pretty clear. Once you've done that, then you move on to number 2. Now sometimes they have optional things, such as whether or not you add a pocket. If you don't want to add a pocket to something, you just skip that direction and go on to the next step. So that's basically what you need to do in order to complete your project.